Hello friends, just a video on the old At the Foot of Lead Mountain playlist for today. I wanted to go through the stuff that I bought for the sort of 30 Years War slash English Civil War many years ago and have a discussion about what my plans are for them. Having been watching a lot of Corvinus Wargaming's chat about sort of Renaissance, early modern warfare, it sort of sparked this idea in my head, and I just wanted to chat about it and hopefully get people's feedback and input because it's not a period I'm super familiar with, but I'd love to do something for it. So I will just first of all explain why I have all this stuff. So some of us will remember when Warlord came out with their plastic sets, probably in the 2010s, if I recall correctly. Maybe a bit before that, I'm not sure. Certainly in my mind, that's when they kind of hit it big, and I bought a ton of their stuff. One reason was that I really wanted them to succeed as a company because we didn't really have a historical wargaming company that was relatively mainstream. Warhammer Historical had gone the way of the dodo, so there was kind of no one in the space that had kind of brand recognition when it came to things like rule sets or figures or any of that stuff. Not that Warhammer Historical ever released figures. My point being is that there wasn't like a set of rules that were easy to get into that you could play. The rule set that I remember being very popular at the time, which I did purchase, being young and impressionable, was this one, De Bellis Renationis, which is the Renaissance version of DBM. It's a very slim little volume. I bought this from Essex Miniatures back in the day. It doesn't have any army lists in it. I didn't realize that at the time. I just bought this on a whim, I think, because I was curious. Anyway, when Warlord released the stuff, I bought it because I figured, well, I'm going to do it at some point, right? Who doesn't need an English Civil War or a 30 Years War army? So anyway, I bought stuff, and I rather fancied an Imperial army, and I naturally then started purchasing bits and pieces around that with no real timeline or conflict in mind, like or particular battle in mind. So I'll kind of walk us through what I've purchased, then maybe we can talk about some rules ideas that I have. So you can see here there's a bunch of plastics. These are the from this For King and Country box set that I purchased. This was just literally bought on a whim. I bought it because I thought a friend of mine and I could play this when I was still living in the UK, and I thought if I get the big box set, because I already had the rule set, the Pike and Shot rule set, I thought if I buy the box set, we'll have another rule book, so he'll have his own copy, and then he will hopefully be inspired and we can get cracking and play with plastics, because the thing that was prohibitive at the time was just cost, right? Metal figures are always more expensive than plastic. That's not true. I mean, look at Games Workshop figures, right? So let's be honest. But metal figures are generally more expensive. You tend to get fewer for the money that you pay, and Warlord were providing the option for people to buy a kit that could be put together in multiple ways, and you could build the figures the way you want, right? So you weren't necessarily limited. You could purchase a box and then you could make bits and pieces out of it the way you wanted to. So these plastics are from this For King and Country box, and my hope was that my friend would kind of get the bug and he'd be keen, because he was the guy that was playing 15mm DBA with me at the time, and I thought, well, if I can offer him a cheap alternative, what I should have probably done was just got him the rule book and then said, let's do it in 15, right, or 10 or 6mm. But the 28mm stuff looks really good. So, well, looks good when it's painted, rather. So these figures are not, I want to give you an example. These figures aren't perfect. They're not super awesome. They are okay. There are some interesting choices made by Warlord, like having to glue their hats on, and then obviously you've got to do arms and all that jazz. I've stated before, I'm not a huge fan of plastics that give you that much choice for the most part. For skirmish games it's different, because obviously if you're putting together like a very limited little warband, fine, whatever. If you've got 10 figures to put together, the investment in time of gluing them all together is fine. But when it comes to something like musketeers or pikemen, you just need them painted and put on a big multi-base. You don't really care about, the little accoutrement like feathers and swords and all that kind of jazz. And the thing is, here's an example. So with this guy, I gave him the sort of Morian helmet, and then I gave him a sword, and I put a feather on him as well, just to try and make him look a bit more sharp. But that's all time kind of wasted, really, when it comes down to it. I also bought, because I bought the rule book first, I got this standard bearer, which I've never even taken out of the box. But yeah, nice figure from Warlord. I purchased an additional pike and shot command because I think I had looked at the contents of the box over there, and it implied strongly that you only get one command. I think I'm trying to remember, and it's been a while. So I bought this because I quite like the figures, and yeah, and I prefer metals, to be completely honest. And then I bought a light shot, pike shot light gun and crew again because I figured, you know, I'm going to want some artillery, but let's not buy the biggest piece first, right? We don't need siege pieces. We want stuff that you can play with. This chap, let me actually tip the camera forward some, and then we can more easily look at them. This guy that I have here, he came as part of a book that I purchased from Warlord, and I don't know which book it was, but I seem to recall, maybe it was a Devil's Playground, the supplement or whatever for the 30 Years War, but I can't find that right now. It's probably still in the UK with my parents or something. But anyway, it's this guy. He's got a knife and a sword. He looks kind of like a Mordheim character, to be honest with you. He'd fit in quite nicely there. And then I have these 3 cavalry pieces. So there's the horses there. I'll put them to one side. These are the riders. I don't know where I got these from. I don't seem to recall if they are from Warlord or from anyone else. Excuse my hands are dirty as I've been working on the card today. But this looks like a sort of chap writing down orders. Somebody looking at a map. These could very well be from like casting room miniatures or something, the Foundry people, because I used to just occasionally they would have a sale, or I would buy something from them, and then you would want to, you know, it's one of those cases where if you're buying something from them, you would sort of fill your basket with other stuff because to make the postage money worth it, because everyone knows that Foundry's postage is a bit of a rip-off. They've just raised their prices as well now, which makes them even more expensive than they were before. Anyway, that's another story for another day. So I also bought this box of Imperial Arquebusiers. I don't know why I bought them. They may have been a sale at the time on Warlord, I'm not sure. But it's pretty standard Warlord fare for a kind of pseudo-metal / plastic box set. So you get the riders. It includes a command. So you've got a standard bearer there, you've got the big old lance, you've got dudes with their they're not, I think they're arquebusiers. You've got a commander fellow there. It's probably a musician in here somewhere. Let's see what the back of the box shows us. Yeah, there's a bugler there, so that's pretty cool. So you get bits and pieces. I bought this because I figured if I'm doing Imperials, this would be a good choice. I don't know how true that is, so please, if you know that it's nonsense, disabuse me of the idea. But yeah, it comes with horses, which are plastic, and then this little pamphlet that Warlord includes with all their kits, and it even has a little standard, so you can cut these out and presumably use these. And yeah, you know, again, it tells you how to use them in pike and shot. You know, it gives you the stat line, which is great. And one of the things I really appreciated about Warlord at the time, and I think still is a good thing, is that if you're brand new to wargaming, they really do provide you with a one-stop shop. You know, you can buy your figures, you can learn how to paint them from them. Generally, they have websites and paid web pages that show you that. They have supplements for everything. They give you stat lines. They give you rule sets that are very easy for people to get on with, I think, because they seem very popular. I've never played any of the Black Powder / Pike and Shot games. I'd love to try it. I don't really game with a group that's keen on it. I know there's some issues in the rule set that people don't like, but I'm pretty easygoing when it comes to rule sets. I'll play most things at least once and try it. So I don't have a firm opinion on this, but I bought these figures because I thought they would be really good for a 30 Years War Imperial army, because I rather fancied doing Count Tilly's army, because I quite like Johannes Claes Tilly, Count von Tilly, or Tilly, Dutchman. And then, I bought a box of Imperial Infantry, so I think, we'll check this out in a moment, but this I think is basically just the same plastic set that we've just looked at over there, but it comes with some command figures. So you get metal hats and helmets, you get metal musket rests, and then you get flags for Imperial and Spanish regiments, the Habsburg regiments. So let's have a quick look. Since we're here now, we might as well have a dig through here. I remember at the time, sorry, one second, let me make the noise first and then I'll talk. Right, I remember at the time figures used to come with these Renedra bases, and the thing I remember most that I liked about Warlord was that their bases were actually metric. So these are 20 by 20s, 40 by 20s, I'm guessing 80 by 20s, 40 by 40s. I think it was Perry, or was it? Yeah, it was Perry. Used to come up with these green frame Renedra bases, and they were always off slightly. They'd be like, 43 millimeters or whatever, and it really irritated me. When Warlord came up with these, I really liked them. They also have these little nubs on the bottom, which allow the bases to skate across the surface, which I kind of have mixed feelings about, right? But I think if you're pushing them around, these little kind of pimples kind of help as little like wheels, so to speak, for it to skate along. So pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, again, thinking about it from a one-stop shop perspective, if you're new to the hobby and you go online and you say, I want really into the 30 Years War, I wonder if there's any way to play that. You could find this pretty quickly, and all your problems are solved right here. You've got all the bases you need. Pamphlet, as usual, gives you a little rundown of the 30 Years War bases, which is really cool. So bases flags, which is really good, and then it also shows you the stat lines again. And so, again, I don't know how pike and shot works, but it seems to delineate between the actual pikemen and the musketeers. I'm not sure how that impacts the game. Whereas part of me thinks that the more elegant way to deal with it is to simply treat the unit as a single thing, right? And not necessarily as like made up of two separate subunits. But again, that's a discussion that's more to do with the rules. Nice standards. Again, you can cut them out, and then you can make standards for your men. And then it gives you Wallenstein here. Tells you about him. He's not interesting fella, really. Interesting fella. So yeah, these sprues, you get 1, 2, 3 of the standard sprues, which are what I built those figures out of that I showed you earlier, and then you get a command sprue. And I think that's one of the reasons why with the pike and shot box, I think you only get one of these. That's why I bought the additional command. But anyway, so you get the figures here, the command figures, and then of course, being the Imperial Regiment, you also get the metal versions of the command. And it looks like you get a pikeman who's metal. Lots of Morian helmets, which I really like. That's a kind of conquistador helmet. It comes with little musket rests, which I think is it called swine's feather or something. I don't remember. But yeah, nice looking figures, by all means. And so there's part of me that's always considered, should I just sell this stuff and get rid of it, because I don't, it's not a core project for me. It's not something that I'm actively working on right now. Or do I just hang on to it and get around to it one day? And I just think I'm gonna Ralph Astley my way out of this one and just hang on to it, and who knows, maybe the fancy takes me one day and I want to do a regiment, and I'll just be able to just dip into the archives of the Lead Mountain and just pull something out and get going. So that's why I don't get rid of stuff unless I know that I'm never going to touch it again. And that at the moment is only Warhammer 40,000 stuff, because that's just a game I'm never going to play again. So yeah, here, this is the box that started it all, in a sense. You can see I base coated some of it, and just looking at it, oh no, I lied. There are actually two, not lied, but you know what I mean. I was mistaken. There are actually two command sprues in here, and there's some commanded shot. There's actually cavalry in here as well, which I didn't realize. I don't think there's anything printed on the back. So what is it? Yeah, 58 pike and shot, including command, 12 cavalry, and 12 infantry with firelocks, which is really cool. So again, I loath to get rid of this stuff. I just need to understand, or need to rationalize in my brain what I'm going to do with them. That way, if I do hit a moment where I really think, it'd be cool to paint up some pike and shot for whatever reason. I'm a butterfly, so I tend to paint whatever I fancy at any given moment. If I decide I wanted to do a Habsburg regiment all of a sudden, I'd like to be able to just say, right, I'm going to do it, but am I going to base some singles, or am I going to base some multi-bases, or what am I going to do with them? So let's talk about that for a minute. This is a slightly longer video. Apologies, these videos typically are a little bit long. So I talked about how this was kind of my first dabbling in the idea of doing a Renaissance army, right? And I didn't really go anywhere. It's written by Phil Barker and Richard Bodley Scott. If you're familiar with DBM at all, this is the same kind of Wargames Research Group production. I find the language incredibly dense and difficult. The whole DBM thing's a discussion for another day, really, but my point here is that I've tried reading this and I couldn't really get very far with it. It was just too dense. The language is too obtuse. So I kind of threw that off to one side, and I bought this from Essex because I figured I would, you know, I basically discovered 15mm at that point, and I thought that that would be something that'd be worth doing. Then Pike and Shot this is the rulebook that I purchased before I got the free copy with that box over there, which I gave away as a gift to somebody because I figured it's nice to give things away so that you then have an opponent. And you can see here there's lots of like eye candy in this. It's just absolutely stunning. And before Warlord came out with this, Osprey published this, which is Field of Glory Renaissance. I believe this predates Pike and Shot. Let's just double check that. I might be talking nonsense, but at least in my mind that's how this played out. So this book was published in 2010, and this one came out in 2012. Yes, I am right. Haha, I haven't lost my mind completely. So this game came out. Now, Field of Glory was the successor to DBM, and what had basically happened, if we look here at the authors, Richard Bodley Scott, Nick Gowcroker, Charles Macefield, they basically booted Mr. There's the name. Sorry, it's not on camera. There's the names, and it looks like Barker had gone his own way. So Phil Barker had gone his own way. So Osprey Publishing and Slytherin came out with this, and the thing was, because it was published by Osprey, they like really lean into the production quality. It's really nice. This predates the Blue Books, so I think this might have been how Osprey burnt their fingers with Wargames Publishing, because this is a really nice book, but I don't think it ever really took off. The other problem is, of course, you get this lovely hardbound thick book, but then you need to buy all the supplements for all the individual armies you need, right? Or for periods at least, but they tend to be like organized by general theme or whatever. So like there'll be like an Ottoman book, I guess, which covers like the Eastern Renaissance and so on. But anyway, so I purchased this when DBM went belly up, or became suddenly unpopular, and I thought, well, okay, I might as well check this out. The book looked really nice, so I sort of threw my money down, and I've sort of regretted it ever since, because it's not a game I've ever played. I don't think I ever will. It's just, I remember people who were into, who I was wargaming with at the time, tried going on to Field of Glory and just finding it really, really, really like unnecessarily complicated. So I will consign that to the heap of history, the ash heap of history, so to speak. But anyway, so then Pike and Shot came out, and the great thing about this was I think it was not written by Rick Priestley, but I think it's based on his basic yeah, it's based on the Black Powder game by Rick Priestley and Jervis Johnson, and these are guys who have a great pedigree when it comes to wargames rules. I don't necessarily like everything that they come up with, but I do think that creating games that people like to play, they seem to do a pretty good job of it, right? And again, this kind of reinforced what we just saw with Field of Glory Renaissance, and I bought this again before I got the that box set that I showed you later on. So I bought this one again because I was like curious as to what Warlord were producing, and it all looked very good, and I was mega keen. So I just went for it. And you know, as with so many things, like in life, if you don't find opponents to play the game, then you just never play the game, and you don't really have an opinion as to whether it's good or bad, or whether you like it or not. And I never really had an opportunity to try out the Pike and Shot rules. I'm sure they're lovely. I know that Pike and Shot Epic is very popular down further south from me in Washington State. People are really into that at the moment. They're doing some English Civil War stuff for it, but I honestly can't stomach the idea of picking up another scale, because of course Warlord didn't bring out 10mm or 15mm. No, they had to bring out some obnoxious 13mm scale that doesn't work with anyone else, which has kind of irritated me, because as time goes by, Warlord becomes more and more like Games Workshop, you know. Why can't they just make things that that work with other people's bits and pieces is because they want not some of the money, they want all of the money, right? Anyway, that's a waffle that we don't have to listen to today. So, again, they look nice, the figures, those epic scale figures. I just don't have the stomach to get into yet another scale. I don't want to do that. So I will consider Pike and Shot. So if anyone has any experience with how this plays for like a small to medium sized game, please let me know. Another perennial favorite in this house is Field of Principles of War. This is the Renaissance rule set. I like Principles of War. I know it's a kind of Marmite thing. Some people like it, some people don't. I like it, generally speaking. I find that the rules kind of encourage the building of really realistic armies. It has a kind of point system, but the idea is that you're not just purchasing individual units or regiments or whatever, but that rather what you're doing is you're purchasing like larger formation. My dogs are being quite obnoxious. They want to come inside because it's cold and rainy today, and they don't like being outside for 5 minutes because of course they're made of candy floss, and any moment now they will just disintegrate in the rain. They're not in the rain, of course, they're under cover. It's just they need to be outside for a bit. They can't stay indoors all weekend because it's been raining for 3 days. So this is the thing I like about Principles of War, and I've said it before with other things, is that like you don't tend to buy individual units. You tend to purchase like formations, like battalia, right? So like if let's roll forward a little bit and let's see if we can find like a 30 Years War list here. That's New Model Army. He's been quite obnoxious today. It's because he's being ignored. You know what, let's go to the index of the army lists. It'll be quicker, so we're not wasting your time. Yeah, let's try let's try Army List 11. That might be a good fit for us. There we go. There we go. German states from 632 to 1660. So this might look quite prescriptive, but that's because armies generally are, right? So you have a center command, a right flank, a left flank, and then you can pick bits and pieces from the options below, and then you assign them underneath these larger formations. And that's one of the things I like about this rule set, or all of the Principles of War rules, is the ability, or the way that the game essentially like encourages you to build realistic formations. This is not a new idea, I've said it before. So yeah, this might be where I start off at any rate. The curious thing about this one is the way that the units are based, so I'll just show you that quickly, because that's always important, right? So the Warlord games are quite non-prescriptive. They have like bands. They're like, oh, as long as you're, we suggest that your regiments, I guess regiments is the right word, but that your regiments be based on, bases this wide, and they tend to be multiples of 4, because they give you those 40 by 40 bases, which is great. But in the case of Principles of War, he recommends for 28mm for a, let's use a Pike and Shot formation here. He recommends 9 centimeters frontage, which you double for 28mm, so 18 centimeters wide, 6mm deep, which works for me because I'm one of those weirdos who like 60 by 60 bases. So what I would basically do is every Pike and Shot unit would be constituted of 3 60 by 60 bases, which works really nicely. I suppose we could be a little bit more conservative and go for 3 40 by 40 bases, and then end up with a frontage of 120 millimeters. But that's just an idea, right? Now, this is going to matter because there's another contender for rule set here, which I will show you shortly. First of all, no. There are two more contenders for rules. The second to last is Amati. There is a version of Amati that a friend of mine has written. He was working with Artie Conliffe on it, the original Amati author. It seems to me like, and from what he said, Artie's not really interested anymore in like bringing anything new out for Amati. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that project. But the basing system for that is based upon on double bases. So in 28mm it would be 260mm bases, so 120mm wide would form a unit essentially, and so you would if we think about it, like kind of sort of, let me use this book as an example because I think the drawing will at least help us. But if you look at this formation here, it would be, imagine this, but with a slightly, sorry, let me just get the camera to frame it. There you go. So yeah, so imagine this is like 80mm wide, right? So you would have like, you would probably have the 40mm in the middle would be set aside for your pike, and then you'd have two 20mm wings, 220mm wide wings on either side for your shot. And you really want them to be quite densely populated, so you would probably have, for your central 40mm, you'd probably want to have like 4 or 5 wide pike, and then you want to put like 2 and 2 on the wings. But because you've got that 120mm frontage, you can really play with it. I think you can probably compress the pikemen together more tightly in the center, so we'd sort of squeeze them together, because pikemen tend to rank up nice and neatly because they're all kind of facing the same direction. You don't have the musket to contend with. The pike's all kind of in the same shape and forward. Then maybe what you would then do is you'd free up some real estate on the flanks. So again, you'd think this would be 80mm. You would have a sort of 40mm band in the middle, which you want to squeeze your pike into, and then you have a bit of room that, depending on how tight your pike are, you might be able to win back a few millimeters on either side, so you can get more shot on there or whatever. So that's an option. And then there's one more contender which I'm going to do on my computer with my other microphone, so that I can show you what I'm talking about rather than print it out and then discuss it. Alright, so as promised, we're going to have a look at some other options. I said one more option, but actually there's 2 more options. So the first of those options is Art de la Guerre Renaissance, which is a very popular Ancients game that generally utilizes the DBX standard. So that means that 15mm figures are on 40mm wide bases and 28mm figures are on 60mm wide bases. You can see here this picture demonstrates their conception of how units work in the Renaissance version of the game, which is currently in beta. And here are some tertios for us to look at, and I think they look pretty sharp, right? I would argue they don't really look like units. They're a bit kind of thin on the ground. It's this aesthetic thing I think that Ralph commented on before, where, you know, people will say, oh, here's my battalion, and it's like 9 blokes, right? It looks a bit like Sharp, an episode of Sharp, where the French battalion comes attacking over the hill, and it's 6 guys, you know, in shakos. It didn't really look like a battalion, right? But I guess there's a degree of abstraction that we have to allow for. So these look like 15mm figures. I'm not sure what the base size it would be. I imagine this is probably 80mm wide, 80mm deep, maybe a bit bigger, I'm not sure. But anyway, there's some really good stuff on this website. If you go to odlgr-r.com, very nice. But what I did was, they've got the current beta rules available, QRS and the army lists. Here are some Janissaries. So again, that looks pretty good. I'm not sure what base width that would be, but we can find out. And this is what I wanted to show you. So obviously it's a work in progress, so there are errors and such in it. But what's really cool is, much like, let me zoom that in so you guys can see nicely. For those who are perhaps on, how do I make that go away? There we go. For those who are maybe on phones or something. So the game, much like the Principles of War that we looked at, the game conceives of bases as basically containing the fighting unit, which includes both the pike and the shot, which I kind of like. I'm not averse to butting up like the shot to the edges of the pike, but I think from like a ease of movement and ease of storage and ease of transport standpoint, these bigger bases might actually work. But there's a caveat with that, which I'll discuss later. Well, actually, I'll discuss it now. The problem is, if you use these big bases, you limit your ability to skirmish game with the figures. But I have some thoughts on that in a minute, so we'll talk about that when we discuss the last option. But yeah, as you can see there, everything is considered as having a front, and then the figures are basically placed in the appropriate configuration for the shape of the unit. So this is the keel, which is like a, well, I guess I don't know how to pronounce it in English, but this is going to be, this is a pike formation. Then there's a columella, which has got a little bit of guns. Then there's a tertia, which has lots of guns, and then there's a later tertiary with even more guns, and then a tighter formation with the guns in sleeves, and then we end up with pike and shot. So this is kind of the shape I want things to look like, right? And then nice, handily, they've got this table which shows you how many figures they suggest for 15 to 28 mil. They've actually bumped up the width for 28 mil to 80 mil wide. I think that's because a modern 28 mil is really no longer as skinny as a 28 mil as it was maybe 30 years ago. So a lot of those base widths were determined based on like Hinchcliffe figures and stuff like that, which are now tiny compared to modern figures. So I don't know, you pick your poison kind of thing. The nice thing is that you end up with that 120 width, which we discussed earlier. That makes this compatible with Amati, because Amati uses a DBX standard. Or we could go for almost that Principles of War width, but I guess it's up to user choice. I think this 120 is probably going to be the standard, given that 60 by 60 is the standard for like ADLG, generally speaking. But yeah, so you can see that they're sort of double wide bases. Their depth tends to vary based upon the role that they're playing, that the figures are playing. So this 120 by 60 pike and shot formation is my kind of jam. And I think, if I recall correctly, the period I was looking at for the 30 Years' War, the troops might be rated as later tertiaries rather than pike and shot, which would make their formation look more like this. But I don't think there's really anything in it. I think, again, as long as your opponent knows what they are, it's good enough for government work, right? So, anyway, so you can see here there's like, the game basically subsists on slightly wider units, and then the cavalry tends to obey the rules of the standard base widths along with the light infantry. And I quite like this because, again, it's a relatively standard game. ADLG is a game I really want to learn to play. And I think, given that ADLG seems relatively popular, this might have some legs, but, we'll see. Still a beta, so who knows, right? Then there was one final game that I wanted to talk about, which is called Pikeman's Lament. And the reason I know about this rule set is because of this guy. There we go. I believe this is one of the co-authors. Michael is his name. And he did, when this game was being play tested, his blog was full of like really nice materials about the game and what it's going to look like and how he's based his figures and so on. And one of the things he's done, again, sorry for the slow loading time, is he's multi-based some of his figures. So he goes like 1, 2, 3, which allows you to basically count the casualties without getting silly. So when you lose a single casualty, take the single figure away. Then when you lose another, you replace the 2 with a 1, or you see what I'm saying? You can. It's quite flexible in that regard, which I like. Now this is what causes me grief, right? Not grief, but you know what I mean. Causes me some trouble. So I look at this and I think to myself, right? I can see myself playing a game like Pikeman's Lament. I like the rampant games, generally speaking. I think they're quite fun, but they're not really a big battle game. And then I ask myself, well, what am I trying to achieve with these figures? Do I want to play big battles? Do I want to play a skirmish type game? And then I remember reading somewhere that the 30 Years' War was typified by a lot of petit guerre, like little war, like the kind of skirmish on the border, small ambushes and so on. And that looks good when you've got this kind of thing, where everyone's got a firearm, but I think it gets kind of silly if you have units of like 6 pikemen running around with their pikes. You don't really get that sense that it's like a bristling, unit of like pikes that's dangerous. It's just a couple of dudes with long sticks, really, and that's kind of that thing of like density sort of leads to a degree of like not realism, but a sense of authenticity, right? So when you're playing with you know, 6 blokes in a group with pikes, they look a bit silly, but when it's a nice big chunk of them all ranked up together, they tend to look a bit more, you know, forbidding in terms of a target that you may want to charge. So I don't know, we'll see. But I mean, the game, this is Pikeman's Lament. It looks like they played it at a massive scale. Yeah, and from all I can tell, the game, everyone seems to really like it. So it's one of those things that I definitely consider it. I kind of need a bit more insight there as to like whether it's going to scratch the itch or not. And then the other thing then is like, well, to what degree can I work around this multi-base thing? Because like I said earlier, my I don't know if I did say this, but my personal taste is for multi-based figures rather than singularly based figures. And I'm not sure if I will enjoy the 30 Years War on even based with these multi-bases like this. I'm not sure if that's my jam. I just can't tell you. I think this looks really good, and I think it's probably appropriate for something like the French and Indian Wars, or like this. This is probably the Great Northern War, right? That kind of looks good too. But I think if you were trying to play a big rank and flank battle, this will probably look a little bit silly. You know, as a sort of model for the battle on the table. And then part of me thinks, well, if I want to play big rank and flank, probably what I should be doing is going down scale to the 15 mils or something like that, maybe the 10 mils, and doing it properly. So I don't know. I'd be curious to know what people think. So if you do have an opinion on the matter, please let me know. You know, I'm always keen to listen to others and hear what you all have to say. I know Corvinus Wargaming's played this one before. You know, Pikeman's Lament. So I think, you know, I'd be keen to hear from anyone who likes Pikeman's Lament, please, or doesn't like it, whatever. Do let me know. I'd be keen to get your feedback. So, you know, to sort of not put too fine a point on it, I need to make a decision about what shape my 30 Years War figures are going to take, and I needed to decide if they're either going to be a sort of for a skirmish game, or if they're going to be for a rank and flank game. And honestly, looking at this right now, sort of inclined to think probably going to go for like something like this. But then this is the piece that gets me, right? And the photo's slightly blurry, out of focus, but there is something slightly, I'll say ludicrous, but that does look slightly silly, you know. Looks like a couple of sealed knot reenactors getting together with their pikes. I don't know. I guess I won't really know until I see as to whether it's kind of my jam or not. I guess we'll find out. But anyway, so yeah, that's my conversation about what to do with my 30 Years War stuff. I haven't fully decided what to do, but Pikeman's Lament looks like a winner at 28mm, just as a thought. ADLG looks like another option, but I don't think that I can accomplish both with the same figures, if that makes sense. And so then I'd like the community and the community's feedback, if you will. You may ask, why would I care what people on YouTube think? Well, I like to think that we have a sort of parasocial relationship in the sense that, we're a community of people that we might be separated by geography. We might not live down the road from each other. We might never meet in person, but I feel like we all have a sort of like I said, parasocial relationship where we're in it together. Obviously, we get to know each other to some degree, even if it is only remotely online. And so, to my mind, that kind of means that there are some YouTubers whose opinion does matter to me, right? And generally, the people who comment on my videos, the nice people who are very pleasant and contribute neatly to the conversation and nicely to the conversation. And with that said, then, I'd be mad keen to hear what they think. And here we can see, actually, this is a good example. He's got some round-based ones here, but then he's also got some square-based ones. And those don't look too bad, do they? So those look like 40 by 40s, and those look like 20 by 20 bases. So this might work for me. Anyway, enough of that. Thanks for watching. I hope this has been mildly interesting, more for the discussion rather than just showing you some stupid figures. And hope to hear from some of you, and maybe we can come up with a plan. Thanks for watching.